All right, good evening, everybody. Excellent. Thank you for coming out to tonight's event. I also want to thank those on Facebook Live who are tuned in who can't be here in person. Next, I want to take an opportunity to thank my communications department at Gwinnett County. Thank you for hosting and setting up this event or helping us with this event. I do want to thank the City of Peachtree Corners for being a great host. This is the third time I've had an event at Peachtree Corners City Hall, and every time they've taken care of us. So I definitely want to thank and acknowledge y'all, everything that you've done to get us here today. So real quick, tonight's town hall event, we'll talk a good deal about the millage rate. We'll get into some of the details about that, the financial health of Gwinnett County, Georgia, and then we'll pivot some other local issues such as public safety, housing, upcoming transit referendum. But we'll definitely make sure there's time in the program to turn over for Q&A to make sure we're answering questions that y'all may have top of mind. So real quick, I guess we'll get into it. So earlier this month, July 16th to be exact, the Board of Commissioners adopted a millage rate. It was the same millage rate as prior years, and this millage rate was at 6.95 mils. Now, before the vote, the Board of Commissioners, we held 3 public hearings. We posted in the legal organ. That's required by state law. We'll get into that a little later. We accepted public comments via our online portal. We reviewed those comments, and then we took a board vote. Now that this board vote is complete, the Tax Commissioner's Office will send tax bills out mid-August, and property tax bills will be due mid-October. This was a split vote. This was not an easy decision. I think this item passed 3-2 majority of the 5 commissioners. And I think some of the commissioners, again, I won't speak for myself, but I know all of us had to wrestle with the impacts that inflation is having on the private sector and our residents. But with all that, it still led us to a 3-2 vote in favor of keeping the millage rate the same at 6.95 mils. Now that the millage rate hearings were held and the Board of Commissioners decided to keep the millage rate the same and keep it steady, I'd like to highlight one of the critical tools that's available for homeowners. I found throughout the public hearing process a number of people either didn't know or didn't have a full understanding of what the value offset exemption is. So if you know anything about me, you know I like acronyms. So I'm going to refer to it as the VOE throughout this presentation. So if you hear VOE, know that it stands for value offset exemption. So in Gwinnett County, right, and we're one of 5 or 6 counties in Georgia that have this tool. But in Gwinnett County, if you qualify for the regular homestead exemption, which means you have owned and lived in your home on January 1st of any given year, you qualify for the value offset exemption, or what I refer to as the VOE. There are no income limits, and there are no age requirements for the VOE. The VOE applies to a home and up to 5 acres of land. The VOE protects homeowners from the county property tax increases that are the result of increases in a property's market value. The VOE sets the taxable rate, the taxable value of your property the year that you qualify for the exemption. So even if market values change, like they have in recent years, generally, those who benefit from the value offset exemption won't see an increase in their county government taxes due to high market values or higher property assessments. Again, the VOE applies to a person's primary residential property. And again, it only applies up to 5 acres of land. By that I mean this: the VOE doesn't apply for apartment complexes, right? So if you live in a rental community, you are not able to use the VOE. It does not apply to commercial businesses. It does not apply to investment properties, such as rental homes. It's only for primary residential properties. 59% of Gwinnett's residential property owners currently benefit from the value offset exemption. So again, some of those properties that don't receive the VOE is because they're investment properties, but I do find there's a lot of folks that don't have these homestead exemptions, which means they don't take the value of the VOE. And the purpose of these town hall events is to educate Gwinnettians on a tool that's available to them that, candidly, most Georgians don't have, right? But they don't know about. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to promote it. The VOE only applies to the Gwinnett County government taxes. This does not apply to your city or school system taxes, and we'll touch more on that later. The VOE does not apply to commercial properties or rental properties, as I said earlier. However, for the typical homestead property, the VOE protects homeowners or taxpayers against higher county taxes due to market increases. It's important to realize this because many people here today, and when we have our public hearings, they see the higher market values and they get concerned. Residents in Peachtree Corners, though, you're a little different because your city has a 0 millage rate. So if you live in Peachtree Corners, this next slide may not be applicable to you. It's not applicable to you. However, if you're like me and some of the folks in this crowd and you live in one of the many cities in District 1 in Gwinnett County, we're not as fortunate where we have a millage rate. So this example will touch home to you. This applies to you. Here on the slide, you can see we have a property here in the city of Suwanee. And as you can see, it goes back from 2021 all the way to 2024. It shows this person's market value, their assessment, and also shows their county portion of their taxes, the school system, and the municipal, the city taxes for Suwanee. As you can see, this resident has the value offset exemption applied to their property. Why? Because their county portion of their taxes is frozen in time. It's constant. However, as you can see, the school systems, their taxes don't have a VOE. They don't have such a tool. So that means this resident, this homeowner, they're seeing an increase in what they pay for county or the school system's taxes every year. Same thing for the city. City of Suwanee does not have value offset exemption. So therefore, when there are increases in the market assessment of that property, they will also see an increase in their annual tax bill. So on this next slide, I'm going to show how we determine the millage rate each and every year. So first thing, we have to determine the digest, which is the total assessed value of the taxable property of a property in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Second, we have to determine the millage rate, or the tax rate, which is established every year on an annual basis by the Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners. Even if we leave it the same, right? It takes a board vote to leave that millage rate the same. So once you have the digest, or your taxable amount, you multiply that by the millage rate, and that's how you determine your county portion of your property tax. And again, we use these property tax revenues to provide services to the second largest county in the state of Georgia, the fastest growing county in the state of Georgia. So on this slide, we're going to talk about the millage rate and adopted balanced budget. So property taxes, as I said before, are the primary source of revenue used to fund important county services. Here's a snapshot of the 2024 general fund budget that the board adopted early this year in January. By state law, the county must operate within a balanced budget. So I want to take a moment to address this because recently I heard some misinformation on one of our public hearings about Gwinnett not operating within a balanced budget. So this law is actually in the state constitution and has been since 1980. So that means for 44 years, longer than I've been alive, Gwinnett County has operated within a balanced budget. It's the law. We have to do it. When the Board of Commissioners adopted the 2024 budget in January of this year, the budget was based on certain assumptions. So we have an economist that we work with. We have our tax assessor's office and finance. They work with one another to come to a conclusion or come to some guesstimate of where they think the digest will be in future years. Now, one of those assumptions is the projected level of tax revenue that we will collect in 2024. Keep in mind, though we're in 2024, we've not begun to collect taxes in the 2024 fiscal year. So for 2024, the board approved $550.3 million in the general fund for appropriations. To balance the budget, county staff budgeted revenues sufficient to cover these appropriations. Starting at the bottom of the revenue bar, you'll see that county staff budgeted other revenues of $166.7 million, which include licensings and permit fees, investment income, fines and forfeitures. Staff budgeted more than $344 million in property tax revenue, assuming that the same general fund millage rate stayed the same for 2024 at 6.95 mils. To balance the budget, the remaining needed revenue had to come from reserves, which is at the top of the bar, or it's the dark part of the bar. The board adopted the 2024 budget with a planned use of a little of over $39 million in reserves. So again, if we have to balance the budget by law, that means we have to program or take some money or set money aside in our reserves to balance that budget. Now, what I find year after year, being here in 4 years, is that our departments never fully spend the program amount given to them for different reasons, right? Whether it's conservative budget management, whether it's for vacancies or positions given to them that they don't fully utilize. For whatever reason, they're usually coming around 80 to 85% of their annual budget. So again, we program or set aside that $39 million in reserves because we have to by state law. On July 16th, the Board of Commissioners adopted the millage rate for the year based on the updated net digest estimate for the year after the 2024 property tax assessments. Staff recalculated property tax revenues that the county expected to receive for the year with the existing 6.95 millage rate. With the new 2024 digest estimates, the amount of property tax revenue that is estimated to be received this year for the general fund has gone up to $355.1 million. Staff estimates that $4.4 million or more will come from investment income and other revenues since interest rates have remained high. So again, it's a catch-22, right? Interest rates are higher, so it means it's more expensive to borrow money, but if you have investment income, it's actually a benefit. But we estimate that these revenues will come in higher for a total of $171.1 million. Now, service delivery needs have gone up, again, due to inflation and the rising costs of providing goods and services to our residents. And we project that to go up by $6.6 million. On the appropriation side, since the budget was adopted in January of this year. The increase in inspected property tax revenue and the interest rates cover the costs of the additional needs. This lowers the planned use of reserves from $39.2 million to $30.7 million and keeps that budget balanced. If the majority of the board had chosen to roll back the millage rate, right, to decrease it from 6.5 mils to 6.5 mils for a revenue neutral rollback rate, the county would have had to pull more from reserves by a total of $53 million. And you can see that on this slide. So using $53 million in reserves would have dropped the projected in-fund balance to 3.96 months of reserves at the end of the year. The county, Gwinnett County, has an internal policy that was adopted by the Board of Commissioners long before I served on the Board of Commissioners. But it's existing policy in the county that you have to leave at least 3 months of operating reserves on hand. So a millage rate reduction would have put us at 3.9% or months, as you can see. Is that 3.9? I don't have my glasses.
Yeah.
3.96. So it would have been right above the county's internal policy. So before we move on, are there any questions about the 2024 millage rate? Shoot, go for it.
Commissioner, you talked about setting the budget on the spending side, the appropriations.
Oh, can you come to the mic? And the only thing I ask is that you give your name so that people watching the Facebook stream know who's talking.
Commissioner, my name's Bo Reddick.
Thanks, Bo.
Bo Reich, nice to meet you. See you again. So you talked about the appropriations, and that didn't change. That, in your mind, I guess that was a fixed number, but you said in your history on the commission that, you know, the department spend 80 to 85%. Was there any thought about saying, hey, instead of giving them 100% of what they're asking for, maybe we trim it back to 95% or 90% of what they're requesting in the budget? Because that's a fair amount of money if you look at the percentage of the appropriations, right?
No, you're exactly right. I think when the different commissioners were meeting with staff, that comment did come up. However, to answer your question, I guess the majority of the board didn't see it that way. So I guess I'll take this moment to explain my personal board vote, since there's 5 of us. So July 16th, when we voted to adopt the millage rate, I was one of the dissenting opinions. I was one of the no votes. And candidly, my view was pretty consistent with prior years. I know, just to give you some context, in 2022, when the county, or really the nation, was experiencing a 40-year high in inflation, I was receiving emails, phone calls, text messages, all the comments from the online portal were asking for a 1-year relief, some reprieve for residents, but mainly small business owners. Now, keep in mind, I represent District 1 in the county, which makes up 20% of Suwannee, all Duluth, Norcross, Berkeley Lake, and Peachtree Corners. I have the largest concentration of commercial businesses: Sugarloaf Mills, Gwinnett Place Mall, CID, Peachtree Corners, etc. Gateway 85 being one of them. And what I heard from business owners in my area, especially those operating at a low profit margin in the North Cross Gateway 85 area, is that they find it very untenable to pay property taxes with an increase of anywhere from 30 to 35% a year annually. So my vote reflected that. I do believe at some point you have to listen to your folks. I've been a zealous advocate of tax relief since I've been on the Board of Commissioners. And again, based off the internal policy, right, the written policy in Gwinnett County, Georgia, policy says don't let your reserves go down to 3 months. As you can clearly see, rolling it back would have been less than a month of reserves on hand. However, with all that said, that was my reasoning that led me to my vote. I can't speak for anybody else. The board vote's been done. The millage rate has been adopted, and bills will go out to residents mid next month. Are there any other questions on millage rate? All right, no questions right now. It's all good because I'm gonna have a Q&A moment towards the end. All right, so the next thing I want to touch on is some updates going on across the county, across Gwinnett County District 1. So first thing I want to touch on is housing affordability, which continues to be a big challenge throughout Gwinnett County, across Metro Atlanta, and really across the nation. The most recent housing data I was able to attain shows that the median sales price for a single-family home in Gwinnett County, Georgia, is hovering around $444,000 for a single-family home. We have seen similar increases in the rental market. The county's median rent right now is $1,618,000. And that's actually down a little bit from where it was last year. So the rental market is starting to cool off a little bit, but it's still a lot. And a lot of our residents are still house burdened. By that I mean spending more than 30% of their annual income on housing needs. However, with all that said, I'm happy to report that Gwinnett County leadership is diligently working to invest in housing and use a wide range of solutions to offset some of the increase in housing costs. In District 1, there are actually 8 housing developments underway right now that contain some component of affordable housing. 4 of these 8 projects will be for homeowners. So there's be a homeownership component tied into it. It's not all just rental affordable housing, but there's a homeownership component with some of this as well by using the land trust. This will produce 47 new housing units. Just over 1/3 of these units will be income restricted, while the other 30 will be marketed to support our first responders, teachers, and healthcare workers. And now in Gwinnett, we have a housing division that will be dedicated to making sure that the private sector honors those commitments. Before we didn't have that, but now we do. The other 4 projects will produce 272 units of rental housing, with 80% being affordable for households making up to 65% of the area's average median income, or AMI. In total, the county has invested more than $9 million in affordable housing projects in District 1 alone. We're also looking at ways to expand our homeownership rehabilitation and first-time homeowner down payment assistance program. In fact, we actually increased the amount for our first-time homeowner down payment assistance program from $7,000 to $10,000. These programs offer vital services to current and future residents in our county by allowing them to establish homeownership and to safely secure and safely age in place, which is going to be a real concern, or has to be a real priority for county leadership in the future as the silver avalanche begins to grow here in Gwinnett. By that I mean as we become a more older, more mature population. So next, I do want to pivot to public safety. I got some great updates on that. Regarding public safety, I'll share some of the trends that we're seeing countywide. So crime continues to trend downward. Crime averages are lower in Gwinnett than they are across the state or the national averages. Crime has decreased in Gwinnett countywide by 16% year to date. So as of July 2024, compared to July 2023, a year prior, this is coming in as a safer year. We're seeing a reduction in crimes such as assault, arson, entering autos, homicide, etc., property crimes, all across the board. Now, I don't take credit for that. Honestly, as a commissioner, as you see, one of the things I do is I approve a budget and I help set policies, but that reduction in crime that we're seeing countywide is the result of years of investment in our public safety and our professionals that work in law enforcement. We're finally at a point now where we're returning to pre-pandemic level crime rates. If this trend continues, again, we're going to knock on wood, we're going to keep our fingers crossed since we're only in July, but if this trend continues on to December 31st, it will make this year the safest year in Gwinnett in the last 4 years. Now, I credit this a lot to the Board of Commissioners adopting budgets year after year that continue to make investments in public safety to work to address our hiring shortfalls in PD, that give PD, our police department, our first responders, the tools and equipment they need, helping to create the new mental health unit. Over the last several years, you have 5 commissioners. 4 of us have voted to adopt a budget that make these budget requests reality. You know, my mother, she was a government accountant for many years. If y'all have heard me say this story, I'm sorry. But she was a government accountant for many, many years, for 36 years to be exact. And one of the things she would always tell me, she would say, Kirkland, don't tell me your priorities. Let me see your budget, and I will show you your priorities. And when I left the house, went off to college, that would just eat me up. But now that I'm a commissioner, I can say, if you look at Gwinnett County's priorities, it's pretty clear that we've been making investments and local law enforcement, and we have results to show it. So crime went down, but one thing that did go up that we're proud of is the homicide clearance rate. So the clearance rate in 2023 was 91%. I'm butchering this. So in 2021, the clearance rate was 91%. In 2023, we come in with a clearance rate at, prior year was 91%, most current year is 95%. So that means that's an increase in cases being cleared. It's an increase in victims receiving justice. It's an increase in getting criminals off the street and them facing justice. So to give you context, we well exceed the national average. The national average for homicide clearance rates is 61%. So that means in Gwinnett, we are 34% higher than the national average. So as you can tell, here in Gwinnett, we prioritize strategic crime prevention, and we try to work with businesses and residential communities to reduce crime. We have several neighborhoods and businesses that participate in the Gwinnett Safe Communities program. This program gives Gwinnett Police, Fire, and Emergency Services access to cameras, license plate readers, and other technology to respond to emergencies, address crime effectively, and helps them with their investigations. If you are interested in joining this program, you have a business or you're part of an HOA, and you're not participating in this program already, please consider doing so. Visit GwinnettSafeCommunities.com. Again, by using technology and working with our cities, again, in Gwinnett, we got 16 cities. By working with our cities like Peachtree Corners, we're going to work really hard to try to prevent crime and deter criminal activity from taking place here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about transit. Anybody that knows me, I'm really passionate about public transportation and transit. So last year, the board, we did that in June. I'm sorry, I'm butchering myself. So in June, the Board of Commissioners voted to approve a transit referendum by a 4-1 vote. We voted to hold a referendum on the November 5th general election ballot. If approved by voters, the transit referendum would impose a 1% sales tax for 30 years to fund up to 75 transit projects in Gwinnett County, Georgia. This dedicated transit special purpose local option sales tax, or SPLOS, would be paid for by a flat sales tax on all consumers who purchase goods in Gwinnett. So currently in Gwinnett, for your transportation funding, it comes out of the general fund, which is paid for, as we said earlier, by property taxes. This would shoulder that burden of funding their transportation needs and put it on anybody who buys anything in Gwinnett County, Georgia. For example, if your in-laws come, they visit you, they go out and buy a cup of Starbucks, they go to Big Lots, or they go to Target, there's a sales tax associated with that. Your in-laws will now help fund transit costs, transit projects across Gwinnett County, Georgia for the next 30 years. So again, instead of paying for transit needs by a small group of individuals, everybody would pay into the transit by a flat sales tax across the county for 30 years. So I do want to clear up a few things about the transit referendum, what it is and what it's not. It's not heavy rail, and it's not an expansion of MARTA. So if this is approved, this will be expansion of the Gwinnett DOT. So I know that was a concern of folks last time, that somehow this would be an expansion of MARTA in Gwinnett County, Georgia. That won't happen with this referendum. The overall goal is to expand transit services to where more people can use it. Currently, right now in Gwinnett, only 11% of Gwinnett residents live within walking distance of some kind of transit facility or stop. If this is approved, within 9 years, 100% of residents countywide will have access to public transportation. And we'll get more on that later. Or actually, no, boom, it's right here. It's called using technology. That's how they're going to have it. So I'm gonna show you something on my phone. It's an app called Ride Gwinnett. Those who live in the Lawrenceville and Snellville area are probably well familiar with this app. But currently, we are operating a rideshare service here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Taxpayer funded. And if you live in one of the operating zones here in Gwinnett, again in the Lawrenceville and Snellville area, you can call a transit service, paratransit, similar to Uber, and it will pick you up for $3, and it will return you to your house or your place of origin for $3. So for a round trip, it will cost you $6. If this transit referendum is approved, we will have zones set up in the entire county within the first 9 years of its passage, and we will provide transit service or access to transit to 100% of our residents. There will also be traffic signal priorities. That's when a quick ride or a rapid ride has onboard technology that communicates to traffic signals so that traffic lights change to green or stay green longer when a bus approaches. This technology ensures faster, timelier, and more reliable trips since traffic signals can cause delays. Another way we're using transportation, by using bus rapid transit, our bus-only lanes. That's when the bus has a dedicated lane on a busy road, and it can operate, move people, while traffic is moving still. Buses are moving. I've seen this firsthand when I was in London last year. It was the only time I've ever seen BRT in practice. So we already talked a good bit about that with the Ride Gwinnett, talked about the traffic signals and the jumps. That's the bus rapid transit. So next, here's the language that will be on the ballot November 5th. And voters will have an opportunity to vote yes or no. And there it is right there. I think the language is pretty straightforward. But if you have any questions about the upcoming transit referendum, you can visit gwinnettcounty.com/yourride, and we'll happily get you any information that you need. So I think that concludes it. Thank you all for attending tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to come to the microphone. We'll open it up for another Q&A again, and I'll try my best to answer your question.
Hello.
The only thing I ask is that you give me your name.
Yes, Linda McPherson. I live in Norcross, very near Peachtree Corner, so what happens here affects me greatly. I spend a lot of time here. Okay, so a few years ago, there was when you tried to get this tax increase for, it was going to go for buses. They were going to spend the money if we voted it in, it was going to be spent for buses. And I talked to a man who was at a presentation in Duluth. They had different places where you could go and find out more information, and they were really pushing us to vote for it. And I asked him about it. He said, well, it's going to go for clean diesel buses. And I said, why are you calling diesel clean? Now, there's not a clean fuel. I'm very much in favor of light rail, and don't put more buses on the streets. What's the status of that? And can you define some of your terms in here?
Yes, ma'am. So let's recap. So in the last referendum that came before voters was in 2020. And in that referendum, you would have saw increased bus routes. There was no on-call paratransit service, so the app that I showed you, that wasn't part of it. And there was less than 2 miles of heavy rail going from Doraville train station to OS. It didn't come to reality, but it would have been a bus stop near OFS along Jimmy Carter. And it would have took, I believe, anywhere from 15 to 20 years to get less than 2 miles of heavy rail into Gwinnett County, Georgia. This referendum is not that. There's no rail whatsoever. It would be an expansion of existing buses, fixed bus routes, BRT, etc. As for this rail having no component of light rail, I don't disagree with you personally. I've been to other communities across the country, and I've seen light rail work. I just got back from Tokyo, and they have light rail everywhere. However, that is not the will of what majority of voters are at in Gwinnett County right now. My goal is to get a referendum in front of voters that they can get on board with, they can support, and by doing that, ultimately address our transportation transit needs for a county of 1 million people. I will say this, just because a referendum, the current referendum, doesn't have light rail today, it doesn't mean a future board can't come with a plan to add light rail in the future. Because keep in mind, if you have BRT and you buy the right-of-way, you expand the road, or you reserve a part of the road for bus rapid transit, you can always convert that to light rail in the future. But again, I want to be crystal clear with you. I want to be honest with you. Light rail is not a part of this plan. Now, as for the diesel buses, candidly, I'm not best suited to answer that question. What I can do is follow up with you, and we can get you in contact with somebody from the Gwinnett DOT, and they'll have a better understanding of if this were to pass. Obviously, you would need to acquire a lot of buses, a lot of staff, and they'll have more information on the type of buses that would be on the road. But I will say this, in Gwinnett, we are committed to environmental sustainability. We're going to try our best to make sure we reduce as much our carbon footprint as entirely possible. And we hired a young woman from Long Beach, California, that helped them merge to their first electronic bus fleet. So again, I don't think that will be the entire bus fleet, but again, because we're not as dense as Long Beach, but that will be a part of it. But to answer a question more specifically on the clean diesel and whatnot, I will follow up with you and we'll get you in contact with the folks that are best able to answer that question.
Will you have some more meetings for us to better understand what the plan is?
Yes, so for those, again, I'm just saying this for those who are on Facebook. She asked, will we have more meetings for us to better understand the plan? And the answer to that question is yes. So one of the things I'm working on now with my staff, DOT and communications, to have another event later in the fall, either before early voting or during early voting, and we're going to really focus on the transportation plan in an educational capacity. I'm going to try our best to address disinformation, misinformation that I'm seeing online, or when I talk to my friends or go to the barbershop. Because my goal is to make sure Gwinnetians make an educated decision come November 5th. But once we get through that event on the calendar, I will be sure to communicate that with y'all. We'll work with county staff, work with our communications, make sure we get your email, and we'll let you know. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions?
Well, first of all, my name is Blaine Wasden. I'm not sure I said that clearly. Blaine Wasden. And this is just kind of a point of information. Years ago, a coworker had a Nissan Leaf and I had a Prius. And I was kind of curious which of us had the better carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. So my wife helped me figure that out. And it's kind of interesting that it depends upon which country you live in. In the United States, with the national electric grid, back years ago, it was like 30% comes from coal. Mm-hmm. So electric is not necessarily clean. So that's kind of one quick point that I would make. Another little, I guess, more of a request is when it comes to transit, I've seen cities that are really well run. And I'm not going to try to just bash Atlanta, Fulton, whatever, but it seems like they're an example of not an efficient run transit, whether it's rail or buses or whatever. And part of it, of course, is the nature of how the roads run. They're kind of semi-higgledy-piggledy. But the point I'm trying to get to is I suggest that we need to be data-driven. So when we consider routes or options for transit, we need to plan for what is going to serve the most number of people. Mm-hmm. And then you don't just do that once. You need to revisit that yearly or every 5 years and say, well, is this bus route or is this ride share or this come pick someone up, is it still efficient? It needs to be revisited. And we need to cut out things that are inefficient. And we also need to, consider what are ways to improve it. So the point trying to get to is often a lot of these decisions are emotional decisions, but I would say we need to look at the data and let the data drive for where the needs really are rather than where the loudest voices are.
Thank you for the question. And I guess I'll touch on the tidbit of that, right? And I agree with you. Make decisions based on the data, keep the politics out of it, service the most residents as you can. And I think the best way to do that is to empower and listen to the professionals at Gwinnett County DOT. So when I first started, we had maybe one person in our transit division. Now we've beefed it up to, Ryan, would you say it's a little less than 10, maybe 8? There, all right, so we're in a good ballpark now. We're building out our transit division. And what I find is that if you let the industry professionals do what they do, they will come with you with sound decisions. I also find when it's the politicians that interject and push their opinions, push their bias into making decisions, that's when you get away from the data and you start to get more into the political loudest voices in the room. That's not my hope. That's not my goal. Speaking of the data and talking on rideshare, when we use the data to try to determine what our rideshare numbers would be, the ridership numbers would be with the Ride Gwinnett service in Lawrenceville and Snellville, what we actually got broke our expectations. What I find are these programs are wildly popular, especially the rideshare. Going back to finding parts of the county where the data determines where it's needed, the third zone we're going to activate will be September of this year. It will be in the Gateway 85 Norcross area. That area is a part of the county that desperately needs it. If you were to look, the 2 lowest income census tracts in Gwinnett County, Georgia, are in that Gateway 85 unincorporated Norcross area. By bringing rideshare service over there, I am confident whatever estimate they have for rideshare starting September, we're going to break it because I know the people over there will use it. So, look, as for the other point, Atlanta doesn't have an effective transit system. Brother, I couldn't agree with you more. I got a sister in Northern California, I have family in DC, and anywhere I go, I try to make it a point to see transit and use transit. Again, I was in Tokyo, I took a trip there, and to go from that to where we're at now is kind of a joke. But guess what? We have to start somewhere. This is a county of 1 million people. We're the fastest growing in Georgia, period. We're on our way to adding another 500,000 over the next 15 to 20 years. So let's get it right now. Let's build that infrastructure today so our children, really not even our children, it's really us. We're going to be using this in 9 years. I also forgot to mention there's going to be a shuttle bus that takes you from Gwinnett County 2 different stops to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. I guarantee you, when they have that shuttle bus up and running, I'm going to be on it, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to see a few of y'all on it, so you don't have to drive all the way to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And as for the dirty electrical grid, that's a little bit, above my, my expertise or my knowledge, but I agree with you. But with that said, I see these vehicles getting more popular, electric vehicles. And one of the things we put in last year's budget was money for support services in our parks to put L2 charging stations at county facilities. And as a person who drives an EV, I can tell you firsthand, there are more on the road than there were in the prior year. It's a growing industry and will continue to grow, especially in this part of Gwinnett. So it's my goal as a commissioner to try to put that infrastructure in place, right, to try to encourage environmental sustainability, to move ourselves away from a more dirty type of transportation. Again, we're not going to pretend that electric's perfect, right? Again, especially once you know how the batteries are made. but I think our goal is try to reduce carbon footprint, try to pass on a cleaner world for our children and our grandchildren. Any other questions? Go for it.
Hi, Jim Freeman from Peachtree Corners. I was just curious, I'm hearing things about changes to Simpson Wood Park, which is Gwinnett owned.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments, or can you give us a little bit of information on that?
I do. Give me 1 second. I'll pull that information for you. All right, so the Simpson Wood Parks Steering Committee is being reconvened, and it will begin meeting this fall to update the master plan for that park just alone. I believe in past years that steering committee had somebody from the city of Peachtree Corners City Council on it. We're going to make sure we have somebody on the city government sitting on that committee to make sure your voice is heard. The object of this steering committee is to ensure that the master plan still aligns with the goal of the residents while examining the needs identified in the Parks and Recreation's comprehensive master plan. There was a natural resource assessment, and the findings from the 2020 Comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan recommended that a natural resource assessment be completed for future parks projects such as Simpson Wood Park. As such, one was completed late 2022. The intent is to utilize this report to reevaluate the master plan, as certain elements of the master plan may remain while others may be modified based on the findings of the natural resources assessment, as well as the findings from the 2020 Comprehensive Parks Plan. County staff plans to work with the Citizen Steering Committee to explore this, both of which are the impetus for this effort. The development of Simpson Wood Park was determined by the Recreation Authority Board, and it was approved by the Board of Commissioners as a Tier 2 priority project, and will receive funding from the 2017 SPLOST. As this was not an adequate funding, I guess there wasn't enough funding to meet the project list. And then for some reason, if there isn't enough funding from the 2017 SPLOST, keep in mind there's also funding available in the 2023 SPLOST, since these projects would also qualify. I think the goal would be to allocate money from one SPLOST to another. I know we have plans to add 6 pickleball courts to that park, so I think that'd be a great addition. I'm noticing in where I live in Duluth and other parts of Gwinnett, people are converting their old tennis courts to pickleball courts. So I think that'll keep in line with that trend. And I find pickleball is very popular in this part of the county. So I think your residents will definitely appreciate that. And did that answer your question? And if that,
Would the county ever consider returning that park to the city of Peachtree Corners?
that would have to be a conversation we have with city leadership. I'll say this, I've never heard anybody from the city leadership in Peachtree Corners make that request. But we can have that conversation. Now, with that said, as a county commissioner who used to be a city council person in Duluth, I can tell you the county government has more resources and money to help maintain and expand a park than any municipality in Gwinnett County, Georgia. So it's always a conversation we can have, but exactly, why not? I mean, why not save the residents some money, right? Who owns it or not is really not, I mean, the average user of that park really doesn't know or doesn't care. They just want to make sure it's a functional, safe park that families can use when they need it. So again, it's my personal and professional opinion that I think Gwinnett, given the size of its staff and its budget, is best suited to manage a park of over 200 acres. But again, I can always make a note of it, discuss it with county or city staff, and see where it goes from there. Definitely. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna make a note of that. All right, go for it.
Jean Frankie in Peachtree Corners. I was at Eric Chris Town Hall just a few weeks ago. And the Simpsonwood Park has a lot of trees being taken down by the sewer because they need to increase the diameter of the pipes. And I was saying, I live in North River Crossing, which is in the Chattahoochee corridor. And so people were a little bit less concerned when I said, you know, where I live, if we cut down a dead tree, we have to plant something new. But there was still a lot of concern about what are the plans for replacing the trees that are being cut down because they have to have a wide ditch to replace the pipes. And along with pickleball courts, there was one woman who was saying there is a need for a youth football field. That the Norcross High School football field is not necessarily up to the task.
So we could look at the youth football field. I'm not necessarily too familiar with that, what's available in the area. I will say this, if the steering committee that's responsible for updating that plan, if they hear things like this, they can keep that in mind and make that as a suggestion or a goal when updating the parks. You know, Gwinnett has, where are we at, 52, 51 parks right now. And I think the goal of the county in the past has been making sure that we're not duplicating services at different parks. But what we can do is sit down and see if a youth football field is a good fit for that park. Maybe it's not, maybe it is, I don't know. Maybe it might be a better fit at another park. But I think if we can pass this information on to the steering committee, which I will do, we can see if that's a good fit for that area. Now, as for the trees being taken down by a sewer expansion, that's unfortunate, but you know, it's needed. And I can definitely send a note to Chris Minor to see how many trees have been removed and see if there's a plan to replant in other parts of the county, other parts of the park. I don't think it'd be an issue. Candidly, that's kind of what we do with other projects when we do things like road widening, sewer easements. If we have to take down a tree, we put the responsibility on ourselves to put up a tree in another part. So maybe that's already a plan in motion, but let's follow up with Chris Minor to find out what his game plan is.
Please do.
Yes, ma'am, and I'll make a note of that. Hey, how's it going?
Good. Mark Mueller from Peachtree Corners. I'll keep this at the top. I've been engaged like 4 months with Peachtree Corners City Council, but I've lived here 25 years. To me, communication has been very frustrating with the city, and now you can see from this meeting, it's frustrating with the county. I don't know how you people view getting information out to us, but I'm saying this was word of mouth. I sent something out because of Linda. She let me know, somehow she found it on your calendar, then got it to me, but I sent it out Sunday night and I knew we weren't gonna get, there's a lot of people that wanna participate and understand what's going on, but I'm just telling you, communication is shaky at best, you know, in terms of making people aware of what's coming, when we can talk, when we can't talk, working meetings versus planning commission versus first and second reads. I'm working with the Peachtree City Council right now to develop a flow chart of just how the process works, and then we're gonna turn that into a timetable so people understand not only what all the pieces are, but where we have inputs to this. So I'm doing that at the city level, but I'm just worried how robust is the communication from the county side, because, I don't know, neighbors, we all feel like we're always hunting and pecking for everything we need, right? And it's, so I'm just saying, we could have filled this room had we gotten more notice. So that's my first issue.
Well, thanks for sharing that with me, and that's something I don't take lightly. I mean, it's never easy in a county of this size to communicate information to, you know, a county this large and so diverse, right? Where people are such different places. But I will say this, we tried our best to get the information out, right? 2 email blasts, social media push. I even did, you know, an email blast, you know, through my campaign email, and this is what we got. But I do want to say this, right? Since we've taken office, I think since 2022 or 23, we created a brand new communications department. How? 22? No, before it was a division. See, it was a communication division under the administrator. We took that division, made it its own department, and added 25 new people, right? So I admit we have some work to do. As I said before, if you look at the budget, the defined priorities, clearly we're trying to make communications and communicating information like this to our residents going forward. I did notice something interesting you said about working with the city to tell them or get information out about rezonings and whatnot. One thing we actually did that went into effect January of this year, we updated our comprehensive land use plan. And we said for developments of a certain size, applicants have to have a community meeting. So I don't know if Peachtree Corners requires it, but I know a lot of municipalities in Georgia don't require a community meeting. It's suggested, maybe good practice, but it's not required. And we heard a lot of comments just like yourself. So we said now developments of a certain size, right? So we're not talking about single-family homes or making a gas station or something small like that. We're saying developments of regional impact. The applicant, now the burden is on them to advertise, hold a meeting, invite the general public into a space just like this, and disseminate information like I'm doing. So it's the first year. I think we've gotten some good feedback from the residents that appreciate it, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see how we can change it and expand it over time if it's a good fit. But I will tell you this, Forsyth County requires community meetings of zonings of a certain size, and they've been doing it for years. So this isn't a novel idea. I think it's just Gwinnett getting caught up with the times. But thanks, Mark. That's a good question. Anything else?
Hi, I'm RJ Roberts from here in Peachtree Corners. I had a question about how Gwinnett, the county, and Peachtree Corners, the city, it seems like there's should be a flow chart of some kind to understand who to reach out to for specific support related to things. So for instance, on my property, there's a stormwater creek, and I have an easement related to that. And so whenever I have questions about it, it always seems like I'm getting pushed back and forth between Gwinnett and Peachtree Corners about questions around that. So it'd be nice if there was more clarity around who this is. You go to the county for these questions, and then you go to the city for these questions. I think that'd be really helpful to kind of help people understand how to communicate with you all. I'm not sure if that's available already or if you know of it, but just wanted to share that feedback and to ask about it as well.
So I'm going to actually loop communications into this question. Ryan, are you in a position to talk a little bit about?
I am not, but I can get the right information to you.
Okay. Great.
Because this is what I noticed, is that the average person in Gwinnett has an issue. You don't care if you got to go to a city or county. You just want to talk to the right government bureaucrat to get your issue resolved. And when it's an issue dealing with water, since it's water, you go to the county, right? If it's dealing with a stream and it's maybe dealing with a state buffer, you go to Department of Natural Resources. If it's a city issue and it's dealing with a local ordinance, you go with the city, right? It's a big comprehensive mess. And I think what we need to do as a county is work to communicate how to best navigate that. But one thing I will suggest that you do is always, never hesitate to reach out to your county commissioner, i.e. myself.
Yeah.
If I don't have the question of how to best navigate your situation, I got a staff of over 5,000 folks that I work with every day to help people like yourself navigate their situations. So before you leave, did you ever get your issue resolved that you, when you were?
Sort of.
Sort of.
It's an ongoing issue with some flooding in my yard due to the stormwater pipe that's going under my property. There's just some issues with like I'm not sure if the pipe is actually what do you call it, clogged?
Right.
But I'm not sure how that might work with who handles it. Is it something that we share the cost of, or something I have to handle because it's on my property, things of that nature?
So the best people to reach out to would be the Department of Water Resources, as Ryan suggested. So what we'll do is this: myself or our team, Patterson, my executive assistant, will get your information. We'll follow up with you via email, and we'll see where you're at in your situation and try to just give you some clarity.
Great, thank you. Also, I wanted to, I may have missed this part about the millage rate question, but I saw something on your email that you sent about the revenue. You were trying to vote for a revenue level rate, I believe. So I wanted to kind of get a better definition of what that actually means.
Sure. So every year, the Board of Commissioners has to vote to adopt a millage rate. That millage rate is put into a formula, which is used to determine how much you would pay in property taxes, as well as commercial businesses in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Every year, it's our responsibility to adopt that rate. Even if we leave the rate the same, if we bring in more revenue, the state looks at that as a tax increase. Therefore, we have to promote it with town halls, put it in the legal organ, get that information out, and make voters or residents aware of what we're doing. We did that June and July. We had the board vote July 16th. We adopted the millage rate going forward for 2024. Since that rate is adopted, that rate was sent over to the tax commissioner's office here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. They'll work on getting bills out sometime next month, either mid or late August. And bills will be due, I believe, sometime in October, late October, maybe November. It's a complicated process, but I will be happy to sit down with you and explain it more in detail. But that was the first part of the presentation, but it's all good. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Got it. And then related to the transit line, you mentioned, and I believe you said in 9 years there would be 100% coverage. What is the definition of that? How many miles away would you need to be away from a bus stop for that to be considered, I guess, you reaching your 100%? Is it like 1 mile away, or?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So when I say 100% covered, I mean not 100% within walking or living distance to a bus stop or facility.
Okay.
I'm talking about 100% will be accessible through the on-call paratransit bus service,
Okay.
which operates like a county version of Uber.
Right.
So we have an app called Ride Gwinnett.
You have actually tried it.
Okay, great. So the goal would be to have that service countywide within 9 years of
Okay, so
passing
it's
the
that.
referendum.
I
Yes,
see.
ma'am.
So not like the bus services or anything.
Correct. Now, with that said, you would see a significant expansion of bus services, like you've never seen. And I'll throw this little tidbit out there. If you break the county up in commission districts, District 1 has the most bus routes and most value, right, the most money from the transit referendum going into the district than any other districts. So just want to throw that out there, y'all.
Good to know. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the questions.
Commissioner Bo Ruddick again, Peachtree Corners, Remington HOA. First, I wanted to just share my experience in interacting with you when you took over, picked up Peachtree Corners into your district, and frankly, it's been great. We may not always agree, But I remember the commissioner basically walking our neighborhood in the fall on a Sunday away from his family, but stopping by, knocking on every door in Revington and saying hello to your constituents, your new constituents
Yeah.
at that point. I also, the commissioner's been very responsive on email, and if you don't know our team, that's the person you really need to know. No offense,
Yep.
Commissioner, but she makes it happen. Don't let her go anywhere. But the commissioner also, on a Sunday, took time out of his schedule to come to our HOA meeting. Now, that doesn't mean he can make everyone's HOA meeting all the time, but, and I think he would probably say he got asked a lot of, challenging questions, but
Yeah.
you took the fire and gave a response and followed up with us. So anyways, I appreciate that. That
Thanks,
doesn't
man.
mean we'll always agree, but, I did want to follow up a couple things you meant on Simpsonwood Park. I know all my neighbors, we like the original master plan that was blessed by the steering committee, and the key words were sort of natural and passive. So I just wanted to make sure that resonated with you. No offense, but we have no interest in seeing a football park, football next door. And then just for a minor clarification, I know you got a lot of things running through your head, but I think that pickleball, because I know you and I have talked about it, I think that's actually going to go over at the West Gwinnett Park.
Is it?
Not in Simpsonwood. So
Okay.
we're not going to hear any pickleball sounds. Love pickleball. Would love to see 12 courts instead of 6, but anyhow.
Here it is, boom, right here, West Gwinnett Park.
Yeah, that's
There
all
it
right.
is.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we didn't have anyone get agitated thinking that there's pickleball coming there. It is a little noisy is what I hear.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you and I have been talking for a long time. Just want to keep it on your list of a lot of deer coming out of the park and a lot of property damage, especially if you live proximate to the park from the deer. The quality of life for the deer is not great with the overpopulation. I talked to the lady who's at the Department of Natural Resources that came out and looked at the park, and her first suggestion was something that the county staff was not wild about, but we'll have to figure that out. But it is an issue, and it's also sort of like auto safety stuff. I'd hate to see someone have a wreck. We've had one of our neighbors didn't hit a deer, but was rammed by a
Right.
buck. So it is an issue. I just want to make sure it stays with you that we're looking forward for any relief would be helpful. We know the deer aren't going to all go away, just a reduction.
And I'm
Thank
glad
you.
you brought that up because I hear you loud and clear that the deer population in that area is a nuisance to the residents that live adjacent to that park. Even dangerous. I think the trick will have to be finding a solution that is humane and has majority board support. I'd love to talk with you more about that offline. But that issue it's still in my head. We still haven't forgot about it. Yes, go for it.
Mark Mueller again. Just along the line of communications, your communication guy just left. You keep talking about social media, all the platforms that the messages go out on. I'm looking at just the software that what supposedly municipalities use, and I think we could get more out of this, your website, and have a central place for people to focus and find things. But I'm telling you, the capabilities of what we're looking at the city level are just, it's as maddening and difficult as we all share with our frustrations of trying to find anything. So that's why I'm working with them. But I'm saying rather than go all these alternative sites, why not make your main tool better and have more functionality so that people know exactly where to go, and then they can, and the search capability, I'm telling you, the one we have is almost non-existent. So I'm saying, if you're using the same software, maybe this is a larger issue, that maybe this isn't the right platform for you to do your business and to keep us all informed.
I will say this, the Board of Commissioners voted on an item last year that will start the process to update our website. For those who are familiar with Gwinnett County's website, it's been the same since the 2000s. Anytime there's something new, we just add it. You know what I mean? You just add a new page. And I think at some point, is it the best approach? Is it the most updated? No, it's not. But we did hire a firm that will start the process to make the recommendations, or not make the recommendations, but to update and modernize our website. I will say this is another reason too why I want to dive into this more, and I can't wait till we can get this done. In Gwinnett County, we have over 100 languages spoken in our public schools. We're an extremely diverse county. The most diverse county in the Southeast, the sixth most diverse in the United States. And we have to do a better job of not just getting out information, modernizing and updating our website, but also getting that information out to the diverse communities that make up modern-day Gwinnett County, Georgia. So it's my hope that once that firm has completed their work, that scope of work has been completed for the website, we'll have something that's more modern, more a better fit for modern day Gwinnett. Because I think we all can agree Gwinnett in the 2000s is a different place than it was in 2024. And and if our goal is service delivery, right, servicing our residents, we have to make sure we're on the tip of the spear when it comes to doing that. But look, Mark, I agree with you. And it's my hope that once we make these necessary updates, we'll have something that is more usable, more functional for our residents.
Okay, and the last thing I'm gonna say is I am not an IT person. I build power plants. I use the software there. But every time we try and help in the city, like getting on this moratorium of, not building, the decision is, well, we'll make the decisions and then residents will come and talk to you about what we decided. We're pushing, I think, in overall county that community participation should be right up front, like this person that you mentioned, to be a consumer advocate or community advocate. We need to be across the board, I'll say county and city, more involved up front before you guys make all the decisions and say, well, here are your choices. But we didn't get to participate in any of the thought process up to that point. So we're trying very hard to communicate with you guys, but I feel like we're, facing the wind.
Well, it starts somewhere.
Okay, all right, I'm just saying, the only point I'm making, not you, I'm seeing similarities in modes of operation between the city and the county. That's my only point.
All right. Go for it.
Jim Freeman again. I was curious on the tax aspect. The school tax basically is like 85% of our property tax bill.
Yeah.
Does the lottery not contribute anything to the county? Is it just strictly fund the hope?
That's just hope. So the primary source for school systems to fund their school system is a property tax. And that's for the individual counties all across Georgia. That's the primary source of how you fund your school system. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm not here to speak about the school system. They don't have a value offset exemption. So they just see increase of money year after year after year as your assessments go up.
And so if you have kids and you just have a water bill, you can register your kids at school. They don't have to be legal residents or anything. We have to fund that.
I mean, look, I don't know. Again, I'm not even very well versed in the registration requirements in the school system, so I'm not the best to speak on that. My son's 3, so we've not really crossed that bridge yet. But there are exemptions in place. I don't know. Again, I'm an expert on the county portion of the bill. I don't know if all those exemptions reach to the school system portion of the bill. But if that's your area of interest, let me get your information and I will get you somebody in our tax assessor's office who's more well-versed on the school system portion of the taxes.
Okay, thank you.
But I will say this, the confusion is when your taxes go out, whether it's county, city, or school system, it's all on one piece of paper and it has the county logo in the corner of it. So a lot of people, I find, they just get confused and they think, oh, this is all Gwinnett County. They're taking my money. Well, if you look year after year, as I said in that presentation, the county portion of y'all is froze, as long as you got that VOE. The school system is going to be anywhere from 80 to 85% of your bill any given year.
Just wanted to comment, if you're over a certain age, you're exempt from school taxes. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Understand that, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
for younger people,
Income level. It's also income.
Oh, income, okay.
It is, six figures to some sort of.
Oh, well, I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I do know that. I do know if you do have to apply for it, yeah.
And if you happen to change to a trust and you change the name, they'll lose track of it and you get to pay school tax for that year until you re-register.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's see, what else was I gonna say? About the, exemption, you know, when you buy a house, your real estate agent who is selling you that house, assuming you have one, is not worth her or his,
Salt.
license.
Yeah.
If they don't tell the homeowner, the new purchaser of this property, be sure you apply for your homestead.
I couldn't agree with you more.
So if they're not doing that, and there should be kind of a cheat sheet for everybody who buys a house that might be provided by the county, not only, this is what you should do now that you own a home in Gwinnett County, apply for your homestead, know who your commissioner is, know all these different resources that are available to you, including applying for and attending the Gwinnett 101, which I found very helpful.
Yeah.
Where you get to learn about all the different departments within Gwinnett County. You go and visit the locations, the police department, the sheriff, the fire, the jail, everything. It's very informative. But you move into the county, does anybody give you that information? Like your name? Maybe you could, this is your county commissioner now that you're living here and you're in this district. It's on the subject of communication.
Right, right.
And do a cheat sheet that every new resident, new homeowner, new renter, whatever the case may be, and inviting them to participate, contribute. We need you to volunteer and contribute to the county now that you live here. I think that we're not doing a very good job about welcoming people of wherever they came from and so on. But it'll be a benefit to the county and to the
Now,
rest
I
of us.
do know we have a part on our website that's for new residents. So you click here and it says, welcome to Gwinnett. Here are some services available for you. And I believe we also have a part on our website that shows them who the elected officials are in that area. Now, I couldn't agree with you more that a real estate agent, if they're worth their weight, they should tell their clients about all the exemptions that they apply for. That's what my real estate agent did for my house. My house has the value offset exemption. I knew about this. I had a good real estate agent. We got that locked in. I'm surprised by the number of people, as long as I've been in this role, the number of people who still don't know about that information, but it's not applied for. But that's why we're here today, right? That's why we have the meetings down at the Gwinnett Justice Center. We're trying our best to promote this tool that's available to you and to all Gwinnettians who are homeowners. Mind you, there are 159 counties in Georgia. 6 of them have a floating homestead or something like a VOE. So this is really a gift or a resource that most Georgians don't have available to them. So again, I will do everything I can in my power to promote it. And then obviously, I'm glad you like Gwinnett 101. It's an awesome program. I was cohort number 4. What cohort were you?
Oh, goodness, it was 4 years ago.
Oh, it's 4. Okay,
Was it
okay.
8, maybe?
If it was 4 years, well, it might have been 8. Yeah,
It was before Nicole
became the chairwoman. Yeah.
I met her
Okay.
during those meetings, and it was just prior to her being elected.
Wonderful program. If y'all don't know about it, go to your search engine, type Gwinnett 101. Consider doing it. It's a free program. You'll learn about the county anywhere from 10 to 11 months. We'll feed you one night of the week. It's a wonderful program. Of the 5 commissioners, 3 of us did it. Me, Ben, Jasper. Nicole created the program. Only one of us commissioners hasn't done it yet. So it's a great way to learn about your community. And I think the young woman's right. Any new resident or even established residents need to go through Gwinnett 101. Can you come to the mic? Mark, go for it.
Last one, I promise. All right, so a lot of my neighbors will share this sentiment. All right, Gwinnett's a great place to live, and this is the fastest growing area anywhere in Georgia, okay? What if we don't want that? What if we don't want to become a bedroom community of Atlanta? I moved here for Peachtree Corners, and I like the little suburb, I like the little fixes, but we keep talking about this pressure, that we have to build all these apartments. Unless we're a bedroom community for Atlanta, I don't see any new factories opening, any new businesses opening here. I don't understand the demand for housing other than what I just said initially.
Well, look, I have a lot of power as a county commissioner. There's a lot of things I can do,
Okay?
but there's a lot of things I can't do, right? I can't build a wall around Gwinnett, slow down growth and development, and make DeKalb County or somebody else pay for it. This county is growing. It's changing. I've been here for 20 years. It's a different community than it was when I moved here.
Understood.
And I think we in leadership have a fiduciary and moral responsibility to try our very best to facilitate and manage that growth. So, why we need new housing stock. I live in Duluth.
Okay?
And there are homes in Duluth, neighborhoods such as Peachtree Walks, Norman Downs, where the homes were built in the 1970s, some in the 1980s. The house I've lived in now is built in the early 90s. If you live in one of those neighborhoods in Peachtree Walks or Norman Downs, where your house was built in the 1970s, your house is probably approaching 50 years of age. Now, some people maintain their home, right? But we have to come to the reality that there are some homes that deteriorate wear and tear over time. So for a county of our size, it's my goal to make sure we have decent housing stock, not just for our current, but for our future residents. The first slide I talked about after the millage rate was housing affordability. This is a basic economic situation. It's supply and demand. As more and more people move into this county, more and more people want to attain the same things that you and I did decades ago. They are going to bid on these older homes that are built in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And just by virtue of supply and demand, they will inflate the cost of that home, the purchase price. We talked about this earlier. We said the median sales price for a home is $444,000 a year. Folks, it's only going up. Every year, every time I do these presentations, the number just slowly continues to go up. So the best way for us to address housing affordability, you can do low-income housing tax credit, you can have set-asides for affordability, etc. The best solution to me is to build more housing. Doesn't necessarily mean it's housing that was built in the 1970s or 80s, the same lot size, but more housing units to meet market demand. We've conducted plenty of studies at the county. We are not producing enough homes to meet market demand, period. There's a number of different reasons for that. But the result of that is people are paying more for homes and rent than they ever have been. So I understand it's not necessarily an easy decision because as a commissioner, I have public hearings every month. And I have to deal with groups and have red shirts to say, I don't want you to bulldoze the farm next to me and build single-family homes. And I get that. That's why I truly feel the best way for us to address this problem is to encourage infill development and redevelopment in parts of the county where it makes sense. So by that I mean this, Gwinnett Place Mall, just 4 or 5 miles away from where I live. If you drive out there now, you will see a sea of dead asphalt where stranger things happen. And I'm not talking about the TV show. I'm sorry. But I mean, seriously, that's what I mean by this is an opportunity to redevelop our county, grow our tax digest, provide housing, and do it in a place in the county where there's political support for it, where you, the residents, don't feel, oh, I'm being crowded out and being pushed out of my way of life. It makes sense to do it. We need to do it. We are in the process of doing it. But look, as I said before, this is the fastest growing county in Georgia. It will continue to be the fastest growing county in Georgia. It won't be the same county or community 10 years from now as it is today. Let's acknowledge that. Let's recognize it. I believe we can still have a modern, world-class community with a southern charm, but that means we have to plan for it. So that means doing planning documents like we talked about with Simpsonwood Elementary, our comp plan, our transit. We have to be very intentional about our growth. Because if we stick our head in the sand and say, it's not gonna happen, go away, guess what, y'all, it's gonna happen. And we will miss our opportunity to guide the development of our county. And I think that's, go for it. Yeah, do you have a question? Yes?
Yes. I'm concerned about the unused office buildings, unused space in buildings. Why can't we, instead of building new homes, convert some of those office buildings and office spaces that that are not being used? Isn't it true that there are a lot of office buildings that are
Yeah.
unused? Why build a new home when there's something that could be converted into somebody's home, especially affordable housing? I would think that would be a great opportunity to be able to provide a lower income eligibility for, and a good, safe place to live too, a former office.
I agree with you, and I think
Can you
you'll
do
see.
something like that?
I think you'll see that trend in the market, right? Because this is still a fairly new phenomenon that we're seeing, right? When the COVID-19 pandemic took place, we all went home and office space was dead. And then I believe the private sector realized they can be more efficient and more productive if they just terminate their lease with the office space. And now in Gwinnett, as we're less than 4 years away from the public health pandemic and markets are starting to adjust, you'll see that trend. However, as a commissioner, my powers are limited in that space. I heard the young woman say it over here, the best way to encourage redevelopment of old commercial spaces, grocery stores, office space, are for governments to proactively rezone it. So earlier this month at our public hearing, we actually started this process around the Sugarloaf CID area. So we've actually picked pockets and we said we want to encourage redevelopment of these spaces here. We just started that process. We'll finish that next month. And then next month, we'll start on the rezoning process of the Gwinnett Place Mall area. But again, we have plenty of underutilized commercial space. As a commissioner, I'm willing to rezone and even provide some economic incentives where it makes sense to reactivate that commercial space. Because guess what? If it's empty, it's paying a little amount of tax. But if I can redevelop it and make it mixed use, it's paying a lot more in taxes. So it literally makes sense for us to be considering that.
Be proactive in that. Don't just depend on market forces, because this should not be all for profit
I agree.
motivation. The government has a role to play to meet the needs of lower income people who need affordable housing, and also do something good for the community to make those spaces occupied, and that will increase business opportunities, stores and all kinds of commercial establishments that are in the area. So it seems like it would be a win-win to
I
continue
agree
to
more.
use those buildings, but you have to not depend on market value. And I think I heard you say something like that, like development. The word
Well-
development, I cringe at that word.
No, what I mean by this is if you leave it to the market to develop these spaces, it'll be done whenever they can do it. But as a commissioner, as a public sector organization, I can offer the private sector incentives to encourage redevelopment, whether it be through rezoning or through tax abatements. I agree with you. I couldn't agree. I agree with everything you said, and I'll even go a step further. It's not just our lower income folks, and I want to make sure we address this stigma with affordable housing. It's the police officers, it's the county employees that make $50,000 or $60,000 a year, including county commissioners that struggle to live in modern-day Gwinnett County, Georgia. And here's the funny thing, I forgot to mention this number. The median income in Gwinnett County right now is $78,000 or $79,000 a year. So let's think about that. We got a house that we said is going for $444,000, and the median income in a home is $78,000. The math ain't mathing, and people can't afford to live here. And I'm not talking about low-income, destitute people. I'm talking about hardworking Gwinnetians, middle-class folks. So I couldn't agree with you more. We have an obligation to make space for not just low income, our workforce. This is workforce housing. And so long as I'm here, and I got good board support with my colleagues, we're gonna continue to make investments in workforce housing, because we need it. Go for it.
Blaine Wasden again. Last time I talked about data in transit, now I want to talk about feelings. This topic, and I agree with a lot that everyone has said, the affordability of housing is a serious and a real problem. I can't tell you how many friends I made at church that were renting, and then they're like, I want to now afford a home. I want to own a home. And they end up having to move way far away, way out, where the price of homes are within their reach. Now, I'm getting to a point. The point is, I understand the concepts of subsidizing or helping or trying to, if you have a bunch of condos, certain ones are going to be designated as for elderly or for people that have some kind of civic service job, teachers, police, first responders, all that. And I want to be clear, I am not at all opposed to that. But I think there's a reality wake-up call is any kind of housing that's built, it costs money. It costs money for the land, for the materials, for the labor. So I guess my feedback, not so much of a question, is when we consider subsidizing or helping people that need it, who is that burden is going to be shifted to someone else? Is it going to be other taxpayers? And some people are more well off, they're fine, but some people are still struggling, whether they're young or they're middle-aged or they're old, they're struggling. Or if it's some kind of arrangement where the developer said, I'm going to make a provision that a certain portion is going to be available for this more affordable housing. Well, again, who is going to pay for it? Is it going to be all of the other owners or renters of that residence? So again, this is not so much of a question, but more of a feedback and awareness that we do want to let people, especially young or messy middle of life, move into Gwinnett, and this is a wonderful, beautiful place to live. But how do we make it fair to everyone? That's, I guess, my comment, that the burden and the help and all that type of stuff is a right amount, because maybe I'm getting onto a soapbox. It's like, you've heard the phrase of give a man a fish and teach a man to fish. I feel along those lines with people that are struggling, that you don't want to just help them in a temporary way. You want to help them in a way that changes their trajectory. So I'm rambling, I apologize, but affordable housing is, we've got to do it the right way.
So let me say this. Affordable housing is not a philanthropic feel-good issue. This is an economic development issue. And I believe you articulated it very well when you said, folks who are working class folks, middle class folks, renters, which we all know rent is not cheap nowadays. So these aren't people who are destitute, looking to make that transition into home ownership in Gwinnett County, Georgia, which is a beautiful thing. But they struggle to find a home in Gwinnett, so they move out to Barrow, Jackson, right, Hall County, Forsyth, anywhere out. Here's the problem that I see firsthand as I work with the county, with a lot of folks who are middle class working. They work in Gwinnett, but because they can't live in Gwinnett, they live outward. That adds to your transportation times, right? We just talked about the transit referendum getting folks off the road. I truly believe if we make significant investments in affordable housing, we're not just addressing a short-term housing need for folks, we're also addressing our transportation needs. We're also addressing our workforce needs, right? We need civil servants, doctors, nurses, accountants that work in Gwinnett County for Gwinnett to have adequate housing here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Now, going to the funding part. There are many ways you can work with private sector developers to encourage affordable housing. Tax abatement. This is my favorite one, where you say, and I like the tax abatement because you're saying I will forgo money I expect to receive over a duration of time, opposed to ponying up money on the front end. You say I'll waive property taxes for 5, maybe 10 years. You will save $2 or $3 million, and in return, I need a set aside for affordable housing. The Board of Commissioners did this last year when we redeveloped the tennis center. Remember the Olympic Tennis Center by Stone Mountain? Well, we announced earlier, I think it was last year, that it's going to be a grocery store, retail, but also 280 apartment complex, mid-rise apartment complex, with 55 of the units being affordable at 80% AMI for 20 years. We didn't give them money for that. We waived property taxes, and for that, since we own the property, we reduced the cost of purchase. So by saying this, by getting people at the table in the county who are much more well-versed than me at this, we can think creatively to encourage developers to come with affordable housing. Also, too, developers hear the same conversations that we're having today. And these are national conversations. So now they're trying to think, how do I adjust my underwriting? How do I adjust my finances to deliver affordable housing? Because if I don't, I know Commissioner Carden, Nicole, Vin, different members of the board are going to give me a tough time. Also, too, one thing we're doing in Gwinnett to try to make it easier to encourage affordable housing is trying to use tax credits, encourage developers to use federal tax credits, a program that's been around since the 1980s, to encourage affordable housing here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. And then also, too, you may have heard in the news, we used $18 million of ARPA money, federal assistance money from the COVID-19 pandemic, set that aside to encourage new affordable housing, some of which the projects I mentioned earlier in my presentation is federal ARPA money to deliver those affordable housing units. So I will say this. The goal needs to be, how do we think creatively to encourage new, clean, affordable workforce housing for our residents while drawing down from the general fund? And I believe if it's tax abatements, federal tax credits, all the things that we're currently doing, I think we have a way to do that. That's long-term and sustainable, right? Because that's the goal. If you just take money out of my pocket, right, out the general fund, that's not a long-term financially sustainable solution. But if I abate property tax, if I use federal tax credits, right, if I try to encourage that kind of development, then I think that's a better play. It's more sustainable. Now, as for getting people into a better situation in life, look, the truth of the matter is this. If you live in a affordable housing community where you're only paying 65 or 80% of your average median income, you're saving more money. You're putting more money aside in your pocket, or have the ability to put more money aside in your pocket so you can go off and afford that down payment. The problem is when there's just market rate housing and it goes up every 6 months when you renew your lease, a lot of people feel they don't have an opportunity to get ahead. It's my goal, by having more of these projects online, people will be less cash strapped, less housing burdened, and they'll be able to improve their situation. So that's the goal. These projects are new, but let's see where we're at in 5 or 10 years. Let's check our progress, and if adjustments need to be made, we'll do so. Yeah, Linda? I will, if you call the right one. I got my work phone in the car, but Linda, I will ask if you have anything for me, shoot it to me via email. I read all my emails. I don't necessarily get to all my phone calls.
Departments within the county are important to me, that I'm having an issue with for personal reasons. So
Okay.
I'll save it for later.
Just shoot me an email and me and our team will work on it. Thanks. Art, go for it.
Okay, I'm Art Sheldon, for those who don't know me. This is a question you may not be able to answer. What is our position as far as the city of Mulberry? Why did we join the lawsuit? Can you share anything about that?
I can, now that, the vote's been had, I can speak a little bit freely, but now that I say that, I don't really think I can because it's in court. You know, and commissioners, you can't speak about, but,
There's something you
all right, let me
think
say
you
this.
Yeah.
I'll say this because since we entered the lawsuit. I have real concerns how the legislation was prepared for the city of Mulberry. And if you look at the lawsuit that the Board of Commissioners enter into, it's the opinion of majority of the folks that there are some concerns with how it was made up, dealing with taxation, dealing with not having a millage rate, dealing with the number of services that are, All right, staff's telling me to shut up, so, all right, I can't talk about it. You're gonna get me are you gonna get me in trouble? Yeah, I get, next question.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. Thanks, Kirkland.
All right, that's why they're here, to protect me. All right. Joy, I want to hear it after this. All right, any other questions?
Just a quick one. Do you share,
You can go to
share the market demands on your website? We keep hearing demands for apartments and housing. Where is the market demand that we can look at to see what's driving the need for housing? I've never found it.
Can you repeat the question for
So
All right, sorry. All right, Mark Mueller again. So your graph had the thing on there,
Right.
market demand. Can we see the backup behind the demand? To me, I don't see anything happening. And I'm not gonna repeat what I said, but I'm saying you have some criteria to say, we have to do this because we don't get to see the because.
So, the first year and change I was in office, Gwinnett County conducted a housing study. We completed that housing study March of 2022. It is public. You can Google it. You can look on our website. The housing study is there. It documents the housing demand that I'm talking about. And when you see it, you'll simply see this is demand for housing. This is supply of housing. We're not building enough in Gwinnett to meet that demand for housing. Now, it did slow down a little bit with the Fed raising interest rates, but it's still outpacing what we're actually able to build, what the private sector is building here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. So let me do this. Follow up myself and my assistant, and we will get you a copy of the housing study that was completed in 2022.
Good, thank you.
Jean Frankie, again, Peachtree Corners. We moved here 30 years ago because of the quality of the schools. In a state that, was in the bottom 10, these schools in the country, the schools in Gwinnett were in the top 50% of the nation and had AP classes. They were developing the International Baccalaureate program and many other things that very few counties offer. Now, our daughter is out of school, and it's been, over 10 years since we've really had a lot of contact with that. But I know that Parkview High School, for example, has 6 Latin teachers because of demand for Latin. So I suspect that a lot of the impetus behind people wanting to live here, besides the variety of backgrounds that we have, is the school systems. And the state has tried to back some of that off by letting you fund your charter schools instead of public schools. But I think, I suspect that the school systems here are a big draw for people.
I guess I'll give you my personal story. I mean, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My family moved here in 2004. And the reason my mother chose Gwinnett County, Georgia, is because of the public school system. The reason she was attracted to Georgia, really, other than the job, was the Hope Scholarship. So if you ask me, I think the school system in Gwinnett attracts people from around the world. School system, jobs, and I still think people choose their communities a lot because of their faith. Like if there's a church they're associated to and that locates to Gwinnett, they will follow it. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Now I will say Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners doesn't dabble with the school system. That's a different local taxing authority. However, we both can agree the school system is really what makes Gwinnett County great.
But it's declining.
You don't want to say that at the mic? Look, again, as a county commissioner, my responsibility is to focus on your county government. I don't dabble in curriculum. I don't dabble with teachers. I don't dabble with facilities. My goal is service delivery for a county of 1 million people. And any issues with the school system should be directed to the superintendent or the 5 different school board members. But we're happy to get you in contact with them. Honestly, they're more well-versed to speak on that than I am.
No, I was saying, I've gone to school here in Gwinnett County my whole school career from kindergarten to 12th grade, and a graduate of UGA. But I would say that, I was just saying that my property tax bill is incredible this year. It's, I believe, in the 8 years I've owned the property, between 2022 to 2023, it's doubled in all the 8 years I've owned it, in just the 1 year. And what I was saying is, I'm grateful that we have such a great school system because I'm a product of that. But I think maybe 75% of my property tax bill is from the school bond. What was that?
I said mine's too.
Yeah. So what I was just saying is, but the school system better be good because I'm paying a lot to make sure it is.
So I think when I touched on this, you weren't here yet, but I'll just touch on this slide one last time just in case, somebody on Facebook chimed in or tiled in late. On this slide, we have 4 years. We have a property in Suwanee, Georgia. So in Suwanee, you are going to pay a municipal tax, so your city, your school system, and your county. In this example, you can clearly see that the county portion is frozen in time because of the value offset exemption. You can also see the county portion is not the biggest portion on this person's school bill. On this person's property tax. As you can see in column number 4, it's clearly the school system. And it's continuing to rise as the assessed value of that home continues to increase over time. So with no flat tax or no exemption in place, it will continue. You say it's 75%? Well, it's going to continue to increase over time, so long as the school system chooses not to roll back their millage rate to an amount that would decrease that number. Now, I think they're doing some partial rollback, but nothing significant enough where you will see a decline in that annual property tax bill. I love this slide. All right, are any other questions?
Could you please remind me of your name?
Me?
Yeah.
Marjay.
So like Marjay, I'm Arshan. I went to the GCPS system
Okay.
since kindergarten. My family moved here in 1999, so They've kind of they've witnessed the development in the area. They've seen Peachtree Ridge, it was all trees. But they've seen the Peachtree Ridge, like they've seen it grow the community. But one sentiment I kind of see in this room is that some of the schools, I mean, there's a lot of crowdedness, and that's bound to happen. But one thing I have seen is at Brookwood High School, there's been an incident. And it represents an incident happening more often in Gwinnett now, which is there was a stabbing. I think it was this school year, I believe. But what I want to know is, what is the county government doing to address these incidents?
So, that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. Very thought-provoking.
What
So-
incident?
So the gentleman said there was a stabbing.
Yeah.
Just go to the mic real quick and repeat it if you can.
So just to be clear, there was a stabbing at Brookwood High School this school year. And then also I went to Peachtree Ridge recently. I graduated, but at Peachtree Ridge, sometimes I see students getting involved in fights. That definitely should not be happening in Gwinnett County. And I see sometimes the county policemen, they do respond. Teachers have to get involved, but my concern is sometimes this does happen. Sometimes the students, it will happen in whatever county we're in, even in the richest county. But like, is there anything the county government has done? I know it's separate from GCPS, but
And I'm glad you
What has
mentioned
county
that
done?
because the Gwinnett County school system has their own police department. So they have a budget, it's bigger than ours, and they have officers that are hired to work the school system. I will say this, one trend I've seen, and this is talking to my friends in the Gwinnett County school system, the administration, is that as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the crime, the mental health issues that were associated with that, we saw a real spike of a lot of different issues, not just fights, but a lot of different issues, substance abuse, etc., in our public school system. I think we have to work with our police department, Gwinnett County Police Department, to try to deter and prevent that behavior and prevent substances from coming into our school system. And to be clear, we have a police department that works proactively, very closely with the school system when issues come up. But with that said, we also have to remember that's the school system, entirely different local authority. Again, with their own budget, their own police department, their own set of issues. But as I said earlier in the presentation before you got here, when we were talking about public safety, in Gwinnett, we do pride ourselves in working with our different local police departments. But I guess I'll close the loop by saying this. I'm probably not the most well-versed to speak on matters with our school system. I'll be happy to get you in contact with one of the school board members or the superintendent who I feel is better suited to speak about some of the unique issues going on in our school system. But thanks for asking that question. Anything else? Oh yeah, I'm happy to do it. So this was scheduled till 8:30. Are y'all going to take the whole 32 minutes? Oh, till 8? Oh, I'm sorry. No. So you're going to take advantage of the last 2 minutes? Anybody?
Sure.
Our team is about to tackle me. I
What's the
saw
best
that.
clean joke? What's the best clean joke you've heard recently?
Do you know what the fastest growing city in Georgia is?
No.
It's Dublin, Georgia. Their population is doubling every day. And that, I'm out. But seriously, y'all, thank y'all for coming out, spending time away from your family to hear, updates about Gwinnett County, Georgia. If there's any information that you need or want additional context to, feel free to email me at kirkland.carden@gwinnettcounty.com. My assistant and I will be walking around talking to folks, getting information. Thanks again for coming out. Y'all get home safe.